they will all be turned to dust! Anyone tries to hurt my friends is gonna pay! This is the true power. Autonomous Ultra Instinct! You understand, don't you?
So it's no secret by now that we are finally getting, surprisingly enough, a successor to the original Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi series, only this time, with everyone's expectations being through the roof and what they want to see going forward in Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, one can only go as far as to imagine that the entirety of the anime and Dragon Ball community are going to be duking it out online the moment that this game ends up releasing. But is the game itself going to deliver a strong enough product in carrying the Sparking Zero name moving forward? As joining me right now to further the discussion on Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is my good friend and Dragon Ball community member known as Danny Ray Champ. Now Danny, me and you have gone back and forth about this behind the scenes. I know that some people are wary of this game and I can understand why, but before we start diving into the roster, before we start diving into anything else, I do believe that when looking at this game from a standpoint where, although they've only gone as far as to showcase a 60-second trailer that demonstrates some of the highlights for this upcoming game, I don't see anything in this trailer where it goes off to warrant some kind of concern moving forward, especially if they're going to be following the original Tenkaichi formula. And so it's interesting to see how some people may have a position to kind of overlook this to say, oh, well, it's just another Dragon Ball game. No, the hell it's not. You can go as far as to draw comparisons by comparing what Sparking Zero might end up being to games like Dragon Ball Z Kakarot or even Dragon Ball Z The Breakers, because anyone that has an IQ above that of a doorknob can immediately recognize to see that The Breakers is different than Kakarot, as of course Kakarot is different than Raging Blast, so on and of course so forth. So I do believe that when comparing this to what Tenkaichi once was, you'd be a liar or completely dishonest to say that the potential isn't there, because I believe that the potential is there for this game to be as good as Tenkaichi, or if not better. But all of that of course varies on direction, which we kind of understand by now that the game had been in development for many years, which I think is a good thing, because you do want to spend enough time, or at least have a company care enough to put the time in to ultimately give you a good enough product, which every single Dragon Ball Budokai game has been proven to have a great track record when it comes down to quality. So my main concern outside of Ultimate Tenkaichi, which we do not talk about, which was possibly one of the worst games outside of Sagas in my opinion, but what I want to do now is get your initial thoughts on this game before we start diving into the story, before we start diving into the roster and such, because I do want to go as far as to get someone else's point of view on this outside of someone just propping it up as being the greatest game of all time and outside of just having someone shit on it. And I understand that you're in the middle, as I myself have a bias because I'm personally excited for this game, as I haven't been excited this much for a Dragon Ball game probably since Fighters. So I do want to go as far as to get your initial thoughts on how you feel about the game and everything that you expect to see from this game once of course the game is set to be released.
So it being a sequel is kind of whatever for me. It's inconsequential. It being a sequel, it's like it's using the name recognition to sort of push itself off, but at the end of the day this could have been a completely like new game. The combat looks promising, I will say. It definitely does look like a combination of Budokai Tenkaichi 3 and Raging Blast 2. And it's good that they've spent a lot of time developing the game. You know, 5 years is longer than most anime games get. Most anime games only get 2 to 3 years at maximum, at most. So them giving this game 5 years to marinate and stew and for them to work on it is very good, but also I feel like that can be somewhat of a detriment in a sense to where they're not working on the right things, because you know they can be polishing the combat, they can be polishing the way the game looks while also neglecting things that would sort of take this game from being, you know, let's just say just the combat and the looks make it a 5 out of 5 or a 5 out of 10, excuse me. You know, I'm not saying it is, it's just, you know, example. So it's a 5 out of 10 right now. If they're just focusing on that stuff, the combat being polished and the way the game looks, and they're neglecting other aspects, other mechanics they can add into the game to really make it a 10 out of 10, I think that could be very not great. The game does look very promising from what we've seen in it, but there are definitely things that I want to see from the game going forward.
See, now I think that it's very important that they do work on the fighting mechanics of the game, because you don't want to have the game kind of play in a repetitive like style. For example, back in the day when anyone used to play Budokai Tenkaichi 3, especially when people used to bring, you know, friends and family to, you know, set up the PS2 and just battle it out, every single character felt different. Every single character fought uniquely to their own. Of course, the old rule back in the day was if you had Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta and if you had Kid Buu, specifically Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, people used to stay away from him only because of how broken he was in that game. And so I think that it is important that they work on the fighting mechanics of the game, because you don't want Vegeta to fight like Jiren, you don't want Jiren to fight like Master Roshi, you don't want Master Roshi to fight like Beerus, right? So you are gonna have these naysayers and these very weird people out there that are still gonna insinuate otherwise, to say, no, it's still gonna suck because I say so, which that is objectively false, because how do you know that? If you played fighters, you will understand that each character functions and plays differently. If you play Xenoverse, for the most part, every character operates differently, not so much so like Tenkaichi, but since this is Tenkaichi, I have no doubt that they're going to borrow that formula from the original Budokai and Budokai Tenkaichi series to make these characters feel different, to make these characters function different, and to make these characters operate differently, to where it actually almost feels like you're playing as the real character themselves, other than just playing a simple cut and paste video game that simply operates and has the character look like the one that you think that you're playing as, but in reality they're not playing as the character that you selected, right? Imagine having to pick someone like Goku, but he doesn't play like Goku, you know what I mean? So that's why I feel like Sparking Zero is going to execute this in a good way, which to me, I think one of my main concerns is probably going to be with the story, because I think we can all agree that if you want to get into Dragon Ball, if you want to kind of follow the Dragon Ball story, you can get into the manga, you can get into the anime. You don't really have to play the game to kind of get into it, you know? Because how often do we have to repeat the Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball GT, and hell, even Dragon Ball Super stories moving forward, especially to those who don't understand, like casuals, right? So I'm assuming under the geyser of what this game is, which this is an anime game that's under the umbrella of Dragon Ball, that you're not going to have like elite players out there by the game other than fighting fans and Dragon Ball fans. So with the story aspect of things, I think they ought to make it different. I think they ought to introduce maybe what ifs. I think that they should stay away from telling the same Z story and having to transition from the Saiyan saga into the Frieza saga and then moving into the Android saga, Cell, etc., etc. But I think instead, what they ought to do is maybe borrow similar aspects to what they did with Raging Blast What Ifs, and hell, even Xenoverse, to suggest by operating and creating things differently, by giving us different scenarios, different circumstances. And so what I want to do is kind of pick your brain to see where you stand in terms of the story aspect of things and the overall mechanics and functionality of what this game could end up being, and kind of going as far as to see what you would personally want to see come from the game that you believe would either be a detriment or a good thing moving forward upon its release.
So starting off, I agree with what you said at the beginning of that about, you know, the combat is definitely very important, but I also think other things should be focused on as well. As for the story, I do not want to see the Z story again, just because I feel like the current, like the best way to experience the Z story in video game form is Kakarot. That is the best modern day way to experience the story of Z, and I don't think it needs to be recapped in a video game again. I think they should do something similar to Naruto Storm Connections, where they're going into doing like a whole what if story with like Naruto becoming evil or mind controlled or something, and the position between him and Sasuke is sort of reversed, and so on and so forth. I think that could be really interesting. They could probably expand on some of the stuff in the TOP and the Black Arc and the Universe 6 arc. We sort of did with Xenoverse, but they didn't really go too in-depth in it. It was sort of like little small parts. Like I know in Xenoverse 2, you fight with Piccolo against like Frost and Kaba or something like that. And as for the roster, I'm very hopeful for the roster. I mean, the site said it was going to be very large, a historic roster, as it were, and that sort of goes into my main want for the game itself. My main want for this game is a ton of customization options. It'll make this game a must-buy for me. I really enjoy customizing things, sort of like how the Heroes game for, I think, the Switch it was, let you sort of give people literally any move. I think that would be really cool to have. You know, I was talking to Vinox earlier about it, and he's like, no, I don't want that. I'm like, well, if you have an issue with it, like, affecting the meta of the game, because this is a fighting game, it's going to have a meta, there's probably going to be tournaments run on it, you could probably just have it to where the customized characters can't be used in ranked. But, like, I think it'd be really cool. And plus, it's made by the same people who developed Raging Blast 2, and Raging Blast 2, they did have a move customization system. Not one as diverse as the one I'm talking about, but you could, like, change some of the characters' moves around. You could also change their aura color. And I also think it'd be interesting if you could change around characters' clothes, or, like, there's going to be a ton of Saiyans in this game. Raditz Super Saiyan, Turles Super Saiyan, people who never went Super Saiyan, Super Saiyan. I think they have a really good chance to go balls to the wall with this and give us sort of a completely fresh experience with something a lot of people already have experience with, if that makes sense. Because the combat in this game is probably not going to be too dissimilar to Budokai Tenkaichi 3 with a few Raging Blast mechanics thrown in. Like the beam swiping, like somebody throws a beam at you, you swipe it to the side, that was a Raging Blast 2 mechanic, and that's apparently going to be in this. But the combat also looks very much like Budokai Tenkaichi 3 because it's very fluid. So if it's the best parts of BT3 and Raging Blast 2's combat with Heroes' customizability and also costumes, make it so literally you could switch costumes between anybody. If I want to make Kakarot, like Goku didn't hit his head wearing Saiyan armor Kakarot, I should be able to. I think that'd be super cool. And this game could be the best Dragon Ball game we've gotten because of all the crazy stuff that you would be able to do with it.
Okay, so to touch up on the customizable features in this game, I know that me and you have discussed behind the scenes that you would like to, you know, for your characters in particular, you would love to change some of the auras for these characters, perhaps maybe some of the colors to these auras. For example, if you don't want the Kamehameha to be blue, maybe you want it to be red or green, you want to be able to do that. And so I think that this game in particular should not be like Xenoverse. All of these things, I think that when looking back on how deeply you want to customize certain aspects of an already existing character or maybe your own, I think all of these things should be saved for maybe, if it ends up actually being a thing, for Xenoverse 3. Leave all of that wacky, customizable stuff for games like that, for games like Xenoverse 2, Xenoverse 3, if that ends up being a thing, because all of these aspects of being able to perhaps customize your character or customize things about a pre-existing character just sound like games that scream Xenoverse, that scream being able to customize your CAC or do whatever in games like that, whereas Tenkaichi or Budokai Tenkaichi, or in this case Sparking Zero, kind of come off like games where I don't think they should have a CAC option, because why would you be given that kind of, you know, an option for this game or a game of this caliber when you have an entirely huge roster that mirrors what we've seen in Tenkaichi 3, I think at the time being one of the biggest games to have a huge selection of an anime roster. It had Dragon Ball characters, Dragon Ball Z characters, it had Dragon Ball GT characters, and I mean all forms of, you know, every single version of Goku, almost every version of Vegeta, almost every version of Cell, Frieza, things of that nature, right? So if this game ends up getting kind of like a similar coat of paint to that, where it introduces a different Goku and all of these Gokus operate differently. For example, Ultra Instinct Goku does in fact play differently than Super Saiyan 4 Goku, then I'll take that. And I'm not so kind of like, you know, pressed about the fact of, oh, if they don't have customizable options for this, then it's a no-go for me. But I also kind of want to dive a little bit more in depth to kind of pick your brain in that regard to know if customizability in this game, or at least being able to go that far, is a deal breaker for you or not.
I think the game needs something to keep you playing. One of the big issues with Kakarot was that once you beat the game, you didn't really have much to do. There was no online mode. Now, I do understand there's definitely going to be an online mode with this, but there's also going to be people who are playing the game who aren't necessarily too good at the game. So I feel like really to bring everybody together, they need to throw something in there to keep everybody entertained. Not just with the combat, not just with the online mode, just not with the story mode, but all around. What Budokai Tenkaichi, and since this is a sequel to it, what it is as a series is it's a battle simulator game first and foremost. And it being a battle simulator, I personally don't see why they wouldn't include the ability to do all this type of stuff. You know, as an example, Multiverse. One of my favorite moments of that is when Gohan basically final flashes Cell. I think it'd be really cool to give Ultimate Gohan the final flash and recreate that moment. And considering the fact that these moves are really nothing more than animations, I'm no game developer, but I've seen, you know, the people who've strolled through our server over the years who do that type of thing. It's nothing to take a simple move animation and put it on another character. So it's not like it'd be extremely hard for them to implement. But also the other thing as well is that these systems have been implemented in the other battle simulator Dragon Ball games. The aura changing stuff, as well as the move changing stuff, was in Raging Blast 2, which, mind you, was developed by the same people who are making Sparking Zero. So I don't see a reason why those things shouldn't be in the game, and given that this game has been in development for 5 years, Raging Blast 2 came out in around 2010, I want to say, I don't see any reason why those systems shouldn't be in the game and expanded upon heavily. And as for the costume stuff, most Dragon Ball games include, different costumes for the characters. Now, granted, for Goku, it's usually a variant of his gi. For Piccolo, it's, sometimes just his purple thing, his purple gi. Others is he has the purple gi with his cape on and his hat, so on and so forth. But at the same time, this game has been in development for 5 years. I don't imagine they've spent the whole time simply working on the battle system, considering they already had a blueprint there. They had Raging Blast 2, which they already made, and they had Budokai Tenkaichi 3, which is a very malleable game. It's a very easy to work with game. So, in my mind, I don't really see what they would have been spending that 5 years doing if it wasn't adding in stuff aside from basically the things that they already had blueprints for.
See, now, I don't know, that to me just screams Xenoverse, like I mentioned before. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have, alternate versions of Piccolo or Goku or Vegeta or whoever. I think they should, but I don't think that, it should be a deal breaker, at least to me, when I look at it as a fan, that if they don't have the options for you to customize your aura or customize the color of your energy beams or just do something of the sorts to where it gives you that Xenoverse-like feel, I don't think that's too much of a big deal. I mean, things of that nature should be saved for games like that because they've demonstrated things of everything that you just said, by proxy, even including, a bit of Raging Blast. I don't remember too much if they allowed for you to change your auras or anything like that, but the one thing for me at least that I'm excited for is also online, because we've never really had the opportunity to play Tenkaichi 3 online, only, like I said before, when you had people come over and you'd run a split screen multiplayer battle. Those would always, either make or break friendships. But can you imagine having a tournament of power mode, which I've been, talking to you guys, for years about, or at least having to implement within Xenoverse, but imagine having a tournament of power mode to which, you have X amount of players online, whether that be 50, 100, 25, even if you want to keep it kind of small, you kind of go as far as to pick one character and then it's every man for themselves, sort of like a battle royale mode. Or maybe if they want to do team-based fights, maybe it's 10 on 10, so 10 players versus 10 players, or maybe even having, different universal systems. For example, 10 players versus 10 players versus 10 players versus 10 players versus 10 players. Those are 50 players all around, 10 players per universe, 10 players per squad, and then we have some sort of a knockout system or a ring out system, things of that nature, right? Because I remember that Tenkaichi 3 kinda sorta had that, tournament mode, which was fun all around, especially if you played it on the hardest difficulty. But I think for me, it's the story, it's the fighting mechanics, the way the game plays. I think it's also up to how many, characters you can pick for a team. I believe that for Tenkaichi 3, you had the option to pick 5. So if you could pick 5 again, with the large amount of, characters they can just throw in from super, hell, even heroes. Why not do heroes, right? You have Cumber, you have, Hearts, Mechikaburo, you have, Demigra, you have all these, selection of characters to throw in, mixed in with Dragon Ball Z characters, Dragon Ball GT characters, Dragon Ball characters, so the potential is there. I think that this game has the unquestionable potential to be great, and anyone who says otherwise, they are lying, flat out lying, or they're just being completely dishonest, because for someone to just look at what they got going on now, 5-year development, they're focusing on refining the game. The game looks like Dragon Ball Super Broly the film, right? Which has been everything people have been complaining about for years. Why doesn't anything look like Broly anymore? Well, you have it, so what's the issue here, right? So it's clear that they're putting care and love and tender into this game because they care about the product, so I have no doubt that this game is going to be a monster of a game. Whether someone wants to disagree with me or not, that's just the way I see things, and if you don't like it, I really don't care. But I think that when you look at this game, the customizable properties for this game should be left alone. I think that should go towards Heroes or Xenoverse or whatever else. I don't think for a title like this it's that important, because imagine someone gets this game and they think, oh well, if CAC is not a thing, then I'm not buying. Well, I don't know what to tell you. You're buying an already established IP, so you're telling me that if CAC isn't a part of this game, it's a deal breaker for you? Despite all of the other things included, that's really a deal breaker for you? So I want to wait to see more. I have no doubt that they're going to showcase more and, go as far as to deliver, but I think for me, when looking at what Sparking Zero is supposed to represent, I want to see what they got going on for online. I have no doubt they're going to have regular matches, 1v1s, maybe 2v2s, maybe team battles. Hopefully they have like a battle royale, tournament of power mode, things of that nature. But I also kind of want to get your closing thoughts on maybe what you think online can be about and just the whole gist of what they can do with this game, or at least even providing DLC for this game upon the game's release.
The whole idea of a ring out system has already been implemented in these games before. Like I said earlier, the people developing Sparking Zero are the same people that developed Raging Blast 2, and in Raging Blast 2, if you fought at the World Tournament or you fought at the Cell Games, I believe, maybe it was just the World Tournament stage, but I believe there was a ring out function. I'm pretty sure there was the same thing for BT3 as well. So I don't see why they shouldn't include that system, especially if it was in one of their previous games. I think it would be very cool to be able to do it a Tournament of Power type of deal, especially if it's like the actual Tournament of Power, just straight hands. And I think the whole thing with me talking about, wanting to customize characters would even make that even more insane. Just imagine, like, giant characters everywhere. Jiren, for some reason, is throwing a spirit bomb over in the corner. Goku's shooting death beams everywhere for some reason. It could be an insane experience. So yeah, definitely. I really think there should be, and I agree with you that there should be definitely be a TOP mode. There should also be a Cell Games mode. I think that would be really cool. One person just gets like tank-like stats, so they get a lot of health, they get high stats in general, and it's like however many Z Fighters showed up to the Cell Games, let's just say it was 10 people showed up, one person with really super high stats versus 10 people in a row. That could be really cool. Same thing for the World Tournament. You basically watch the World Tournament unfold. Everything like that should be included because it would increase the game's replayability. Like I said earlier, one of the main issues I think this game is going to face is its a replayability factor. And with a bunch of different options, with a bunch of different game modes, the game is going to have a ton of replayability, which is overall going to be very good for its lifespan. I really want this game to be good. I want it to be good. I want it to be the best Dragon Ball game we've gotten in a while, because I think we've really been lacking in good Dragon Ball products as of late. The manga isn't doing great, the recent movie wasn't great, we got Daima, and granted, Daima looks good, but the story, a lot of people don't really care about it. So, I think BT4 could either be like the shining spotlight in the distance for Dragon Ball fans, or it could be a rotten fish. I really hope it's that shining spotlight, because I remember when I would play Raging Blast 2, I wasn't the best at combat, but I spent my time customizing. I spent my time getting the auras, getting the moves, making these characters, the best versions of them that I could make. And to be able to do that again in BT4, in Sparking Zero, would be an amazing experience. Being able to, spend time like I spent in Xenoverse and Sparking Zero, it would be an amazing experience.
Now, see, I'm not going to hold you because I understand what you mean, and I think that Sparking Zero is going to be a phenomenal game, and I never said that before for Breakers, and I didn't really think that Kakarot was really all that, but I enjoyed Fighters. I really liked Xenoverse 1 and 2. I absolutely love Raging Blast and Tenkaichi, and so I don't have any doubts that this game is going to be a banger, because I personally do think that it is. However, I want you all to let us know what you all think down in the comment section below. If you guys believe that this game is going to be a hit, a miss, let us know down below. Again, I want to thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for your time, to which, as of course, if you guys are new to the channel, then I do encourage for you all to head on over and smash that subscribe button on top of giving this video a big fat thumbs up by smashing that like button down below. And if you also want to find yourselves responding to any of Danny Ray Champ's comments, I will go on ahead and leave his Twitter and YouTube channel located down in the description box below and pinned comment section below as well. Thank you all so much for tuning in once more, and I'll be seeing each and every single one of you down in the comment section below and in the next video. Take it easy, everybody, and have a great day. Peace.